Hey there, this is Matt with the Why We Horror podcast. This is the podcast where we take a look back at our favorite scary movies and deep dive into why we told the story in the first place. The movie we're going to be covering today is Scream. A couple trigger warnings. This deals with SA and all kinds of bloody murder, and we are going to deep dive into that. But first, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Matt, and what is your favorite scary movie? I ask. Mine is this one we're covering right now.
I'm Lillian. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. I'm Lillian, and my favorite scary movie is Raw by Julia Ducournau.
Right on.
I've never heard of that movie. I am Paris, and my favorite movie at the moment is The Conjuring.
I am Jared, and I'm not huge into scary movies, but after watching Scream last night, I think that might have taken the spot. But again, it's a really small pool of movies, so it was pretty easy to take that over. So.
Well, right on. You all have good choices there. I should really cover, certainly The Conjuring is super popular, but I should really cover Raw on this channel at some point. All right, Scream, 1996, as we have to specify now, is directed by Wes Craven, written by Kevin Williamson, starring David Arquette, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, Jamie Kennedy, Matthew Lillard, Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich, and Drew Barrymore, with Roger Jackson providing the voice of the phone. Cinematographer is Mark Irwin, with a score by Marco Beltrami. This was his first score, and edited by Patrick Lussier. Brief synopsis of this film is, the tagline says it all. Someone has taken their love of scary movies one step too far. This is, as I said at the heading, my favorite scary movie. This is the movie that kind of got me to deep dive into the horror genre back when I saw it in 1996. 1997 I saw this one, but I had a hardcore love for it instantly and watched it 4 times that weekend that I saw it. So I'll dive into why I love this movie, but let's hear what everybody else had to say. Jared, I'm particularly curious about you. You'd never seen this movie before, and I think we should, before moving forward, no spoilers for any movie outside of this one. We're okay to talk about the first Scream, but nothing about any of the sequels. So, Jared, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. It was like even better than I thought it was gonna be, because like I think you and I have, like, you've talked to me about the movie before, and I've always kind of thought of it as like, oh, it's probably just a goofy little horror movie, like it's, don't take it too seriously. And like I sat down and watched it, and I was like, wow, this was actually really well done in more than just the areas of like what it's, written to do, but also like the cinematography and the sets and styles and whatnot. All of it just kind of like was like a lot better than I thought it was going to be, which really kind of made it more fun. And it was still, funny, and it did the bits where it like, it's all a commentary on scary movies, right? And I thought it did that pretty well. Sometimes it was really in your face, but it was meant to be, right? Like,
yeah.
But overall, like it was really good. I really enjoyed the fact that Ghostface is kind of like goofy in a way, because I think when you watch like other slashers, like the Friday the 13th and Freddy Krueger and stuff like that, or Michael Myers, there's like a mysticism to the killer, and they're almost like a mythical being of like just like they're stone faced and all they're just about killing. Whereas in this, you can tell it's a person, and that makes it scarier. Like, you're like, this is a human being that's doing this. That's scarier than, say, like the monster of Jason coming after you. You know, he's big and scary, but like you're also like, you know, he's like a zombie kid that doesn't know how to swim, right? Whereas like this is a human that's fully capable of doing all the things that I do, and that's kind of awful to think about.
There is like a believability to this killer in that he's not flawless. He falls over and stuff. And
I know that makes him way scarier than I think it makes him look, you know, stupid, right? Like it makes him, I was just kind of like sitting back and being like, I'm gonna let them explain it to me. I'm not gonna think a whole lot about like why he's sneaking around in convenience stores and whatnot.
I will kind of deep dive into how everything was accomplished, or my theory behind that, a little later. So we can circle back to that. What did Lillian and Paris think of this movie?
I love this movie a lot. This is also one of like pretty up there in my favorite of horror films. I think it's really well made, but it's still so like goofy and I don't know. There's a lot of like charm to it, and I like that it's kind of a not intro, but like very basic level understanding of the horror tropes, and it messes with it a lot. I think it's just a really fun movie to watch too.
Yeah, I agree. Paris, what did you think of Scream?
I liked it. I do like that it's kind of that mix between horror with comedy mixed in, where it would be a little bit of like get you on your toes, and then a little bit of like, okay, the like lighthearted, funny. And yeah, I liked the character development. I think was really funny throughout it, of like everyone like played their role really well. And yeah, I just kind of thought it was funny too that they're like, as they're talking about like what makes a horror movie and how to survive a horror movie, all of this is happening in the background. And throughout this movie too, I kind of like the little Easter eggs that were placed about Wes Craven's other movies, with the cameos of like Nightmare on Elm Street and all of that, and then them talking about Halloween to start it and all of that kind of stuff. So I kind of like the intersection between it all, but overall I thought it was just like a super easy. I like when movies are easy, and I kind of like Jared said, where it's like, I'll figure it out. I don't have to think too hard about it. I can keep up without having to really like locked in and focused. So I liked it. It was something that kept my attention really well, and I feel like that sometimes can be hard to do with horror movies. So
yeah, I feel that. Funny you mentioned the Wes Craven cameo. That was Wes Craven who played Fred Krueger, the janitor, and he was in the original outfit. He had all of that in his garage, so that was legit. And the first time you see Ghostface, like where he turns to the camera and scares Casey Becker, that was also Wes under the thing. All right. We're going to move on to some talking points. Before we deep dive into any analytical themes, I want to give a little bit of love to this cast, but I want to single out one person that nobody is ever going to talk about, and I don't think anybody gives this person their due. So here's a little love for Leonora Scelfo. She is the cheerleader in the bathroom who licks her finger without washing her hands. But her performance in that scene, like if you read the script, that scene is very easy to lift out of the movie, but her performance is so good there. And that little bit of monologue where she's like, think about it. Her mother's death leaves her disturbed and hostile in a cruel and inhumane world. She's like, where's God, etc., completely suicidal. That whole thing, I have run through that monologue so many times at random when I just hear like a key word, like somebody says, think about it or something like that, I will just instantly go through that. So I just wanted to give a shout out to her. But the whole cast is fantastic.
Yeah, I actually, when earlier Parrish was talking about like it being kind of a comedy too, and like one of the first things I noticed looking around at the cast, I was like, almost all these guys are comedians, and I was like, that's, I feel like, to me, a really good sign, because it's I don't feel like a lot of this was written directly to be a comedy. Like I wasn't sitting there like laughing and and being like, haha, that's so funny. It's really just that it's like it's funny in a bit of a different way, maybe a bit more dry, and it's like it's the fact that it's played by comedians and they're so good at their timing and whatnot, that they're able to play these characters very seriously and still have those comedic beats in there. And I thought that was a really awesome. Outside of that, I think what I've got written down for characters and whatnot and actors is I thought it was really funny that Matthew Lillard's face looks like Ghostface, and I was like, that's on purpose. I was like, I was like, that's probably just like a red herring, but then I was like, wait a minute, I don't think that is. I think that's very much so on purpose. But it's him doing the tongue out thing like 100 times throughout the movie.
There's always uncomfortable tongue stuff in these movies, and I don't know why. That's like a Wes Craven staple.
I guess so. But that was like the first scene that Matthew Lillard was in. I wrote that down. I was like, his face just looks like Ghostface when he does the tongue out, and I was like, that's got to be on purpose, right? So
the tightrope that man walks in his performance is, because nothing about that should work, and yet he is the most captivating person in the movie. It's a stunning performance.
I thought he was really fantastic, because it was his fall into chaos felt like really natural, like, because he was just in chaos the entire time, but like you kind of play it off as being like, oh, it's an early 2000s movie, he's just like the douchey boyfriend of the best friend, right? Like, but then you learn he's an actual psychopath, and you're like, oh, that makes sense, you're on board. And I think that's done really well too. He was a genuinely scary person in every scene he was in. And yeah.
So yeah, I guess that was the first like talking points that I really wanted to get into were the meta nature of this movie and the mystery overall. And it's been said a million times that this is one of the first premier like meta horror movies. There had been other ones before. Wes Craven's did one as well with Wes Craven's New Nightmare. That's the 7th Nightmare on Elm Street film, where he writes himself and the cast of A Nightmare on Elm Street into a Freddy Krueger movie, and they're all having nightmares about Freddy breaking into the real world and killing the crew. And this is the first one that kind of did it to characters who are familiar with movies, as movie audiences are. That was kind of the difference. It's a slasher film about people who've actually seen these movies and do the things that people are always screaming at the TV when people are doing dumb things. And yet occasionally falling into the practice of doing those dumb things themselves, either by force, when like Sidney has to run up the stairs because she locked the door and can't get the chain off in time, or like when Kenny, the cameraman, is watching Jamie Kennedy yell at Jamie Lee Curtis watching Halloween, and he's like, behind you, kid, behind you. That's causing you to do the thing that you're already doing while watching these movies. That's always been fun. Anybody else want to talk about the meta of the movie before diving into the mystery of it? The mystery of this film, I thought, is really fascinating because the first time you watch it, you're trying to figure out who the killer is. And if you know the outcome, going back and watching it a second time, they tell you up front so many times who the killer is. Like, there are so many hints that there are two of them. Like, think back to the questions that are asked of Casey in the beginning. Who's the killer of Halloween? Who's the killer of Friday the 13th? Which door am I at? There are two main doors, front door and patio door. That's because there's a killer stationed at each side. A little bit later, there are two ghost faces that are in Principal Hembry's office getting yelled at. Sort of another subtle nod that there are two of them. That whole scene at lunch where Stu is essentially just bragging about what they've done, and Billy's like, dude, shut up, is so good when you watch it a second time. And Billy plays sinister the whole way through. And so does Matthew Lillard with Stu. It's brilliant just because the movie assumes, kind of rightfully, that the audience isn't going to guess that there are two. And so it's kind of a genius mystery. Did anybody, did you figure it out, Jared, when you were watching it?
Pretty early on in the movie, speaking of meta humor in these movies, I figured out that Scary Movie wasn't a super far reach away from this movie. Like, no. I always thought that Scary Movie was just like the most absurd parts of Scream, and I was like, oh no, they're pretty close to the same story beats and stuff like that, which meant that I also kind of figured out, like, oh, it's those two that did it. But I was just, even after that, I was like, I still want to figure it out. I want to see how it gets figured out in this instead, which was, I guess, kind of the same way, but like it was so I think I figured it out in like a kind of a fake way, because like I had already seen Scary Movie like years before. Okay. And I realized that all the story beats were really similar, I was like, oh, it's probably going to be both the guys. And you know, I like, while watching it, they did still get me, because like the boyfriend getting arrested, that what's his name, Billy, I was like, oh man, I'm assuming that's like a red herring to kind of put everybody like at like ease for a minute. And I was like, oh, is that like way too early to do that? But then like later on, I was like, oh, the red herring was that they caught the right guy the first time, and they made you think that he wasn't the right guy, and that's what kind of puts you off. I do
kind of hate Scary Movie for that reason, is like they spoil the big surprise for this if you ever come to that one first. Did Paris or Lillian, the first time you saw this, did you guys figure it out, or was that part of the surprise for you?
I didn't realize it when I was watching it. I think I was kind of in the same boat as Jared, of just being like, I'm just here, like I'm not really reading into things. And I think that's kind of usually how I perceive movies, is just kind of like not digging into it. But I do think from the beginning, seeing Matthew Lillard there, my connection to him is Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
So I always kind of thought it was funny, of like, well, wouldn't it be funny if it was him? Because he's usually the one catching the person. And then at the end, I was like, funny, like full circle moment there.
Have you not seen this movie before?
I have, but like literally watching this though, you could told me it was the first time I watched it. Nothing rang a bell in my head. This was not in my long-term memory. But I've seen I've seen the whole franchise, but nothing was but yeah, I think the one thing I feel like I always look for if I'm like, is everyone's shoes. So I feel like killers always keep their shoes on, and partway through I'm like, they always wear black boots. Like, so I think that was kind of the one thing that I was like, it might be them.
Yeah, going back to the lunch scene, Billy and Stu have the black boots, and like Randy has bright green shoes, and then Tatum and Sidney clearly don't have the black boots. So, Lillian, did you figure it out the first time you saw it, or had it been spoiled for you?
It was spoiled for me. Yeah, the first time I had like known going into it that there were 2 killers and that Billy was one of them. I didn't know who the other was though. And
That's
so
fair.
I spent like kind of the whole time not knowing because I wasn't really spoiled by like someone going up to me and like saying it, or like a post on social media or something. It was just like at the point I'd watched it, it was such a famous movie that I knew that was the twist. But I don't know, it kind of like I kind of thought I was lied to. Like, I was trying to figure out if there actually were 2 people or not. So it didn't really take away that kind of mystery element to me, because I still didn't know who one of them was, but I was trying to figure out if there was actually only one person. I think it's handled super well, and like all the hints you were saying, it's really fun to rewatch and like pick up on different things every single time.
Yeah, there's a lot of hints. As I say, I'll go through and track the killers for us in a little bit here. One thing I also want to discuss briefly, that's often not discussed, is the excellent and interesting sound design this film has. Like, the score is good, and it has interesting musical stings, like, that are foreshadowing, like when Sidney goes to the closet and the big swell of music, and you're sure something's going to pop out, but nothing does, and you're like, that's weird. And then 10 minutes later, that's where the killer pops out of. So the sting was in the wrong spot. When Principal Henry is attacking the 2 kids who were wearing the Ghostface costume, as he's swinging the scissors at them, you hear the knife sound that you've been hearing all throughout the movie. But when Principal Henry is stabbed repeatedly by Ghostface, you hear scissor sounds. Things like that are really, really neat, and kind of not talked about very often.
I agree. I think the sound was awesome in this movie, to be honest. Like, it's like, I think sound design can bring a horror movie from pretty meh to good really, really fast. Like, there's been movies like I think not the last horror movie I watched, but like one of the more recent ones I watched was Wolfman, which by all means is just mostly a pretty okay movie. Like, the story's pretty, solid, and the story beats are okay too, but the sound design in it brought it to a spot where I was like, yeah, that was good. And very specifically, watching it in a theater made it a lot better too, because of the way that they used space and sound. And this movie, I think, did that too. But the movie already was good. Like, I already liked the sets and the clothing and makeup and the script. Like, I thought that all the story beats came at like a really nice pace and everything. So to throw like a really good sound design on there too, like good music and good use of sound, I was like, that just like made it so much fun to watch as well, and compelling. Like, I was glued to the screen, and I was like, this is a movie that like I mostly know what happens in it because of the comedy movie that was made about it like years ago, and I was still glued to the screen like the entire time. and I think the sound design had a lot to do with that.
I wanted to also discuss how kind of each of the characters comes with a little trauma package. And like mapping out the brain of the killers is one thing and really kind of fascinating, but a bunch of the other characters too. And just the base level of cynicism everybody seems to have, which is definitely a reflection of the 90s, but also not like unheard of today. And I think that's partly one of the reasons why this movie ages as well as it does. Paris, why don't you get into that a little bit?
I was obsessed throughout the entire thing. The girl in the bathroom that you were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
I think that scene really, really, really stuck out to me because I think it really shows, one, how far we've come within mental health and like the understanding, even from a teen perspective on mental health, compared to being like, her mom is like all of that. And now she's acting out and turns into a killer and attention and all of that, to the point that we are right now within schools of being more trauma informed, understanding and compassionate. So I think throughout this whole time, everyone was dropping their like little trauma into the bit. And I really was intrigued about how much everything was kind of just looked over a little bit. Also the fact that there was no adults in this really also really threw me. Especially where I was like, okay, this is like the anniversary for Sidney coming up, all of this kind of stuff. It doesn't seem like anyone's checking in, anyone's anything like that. And I think when we have co-occurring disorders, compounding trauma, very complex emotional responses, for it seems like all of the characters very much so shown within Billy, and how when things aren't addressed, how they can come out in different ways, where it's like, well, if we have trauma, then we're really hyper fixating on horror or killings and that kind of stuff. But then things like Billy, where it's like, well, we do have this personal trauma, which also isn't terribly uncommon. Of like, if I picked up on it right, it was like his mom had an affair.
Her mom had an affair with his dad.
With his dad, which I'm like,
Which
one,
makes the
not
story
very
a touch incesty.
yeah. Oh, facts. But I'm like, that's not terribly uncommon. Like parents getting in extramarital affairs. But the way that
happened to my friends.
Yup. No plenty of people, but it's like the way that he had such an internal response to that, of the divorce, the abandonment, the leading to severe deviant behavior, resulting without getting help and nothing getting addressed, leading to revenge in such an extreme way of wanting to kill to get the point across, and everyone else having their own little things and how they express it. I thought it was very, very intriguing. But between Billy and then the girls in the bathroom kind of talking about like, I think it's her because she wants attention, because she has trauma, and this is how she's going to get it. Instead of putting it on her, she's going to put it externally. I thought it was very, very interesting, while also showing how far societally we have come.
It's also kind of fascinating in how it informs Sidney, right? Like, because Sidney's having appropriate responses emotionally to everything that's happening, but the external people around her are not helping her with that, which you kind of pointed out. Obviously, Billy's going to do what Billy's going to do, but it's the girls in the bathroom. It's the subtle pressure of like her friend group and whatnot too, and the continued abandonment of her father. Though all of this supposedly started because he was never home. Her dad was never home, so the mom was a very unhappy woman and started sleeping with Billy's dad, as well as Cotton Weary, who has the same haircut as Billy, which is how he got put away.
I was gonna say the amount of people that kept telling Sidney to like just get over it after a year was like wild. I was just like, obviously with Billy saying it, it was like, well, it's because he did it, right? Like he's just a psycho, but he wasn't the only character that like kind of gave that like expectation to Sidney. Like her friend was like, let's just go party. It's the 1 year of your mom's death. Let's go, get shit faced and do whatever, while all these people are getting, attacked and murdered and whatnot. And there's a curfew, and it's like nobody's taking her seriously. I had written down somewhere that I was like, one thing I thought was interesting was that people were taking the murders seriously, and then I immediately wrote never mind, because it was like the principal was like playing around with the mask and stuff. I was like, oh, he's not taking this fucking seriously. This is ridiculous. But by far nobody was taking the mental aspects of this seriously, and that's clearly the undoing of the whole movie, right? Like,
I think a lot of that has to do with this movie came out just like a touch early, right? Because a lot of this film is very Columbine-y. And in the wake of Columbine, which happened 3 years later, which would go on to impact one of the Scream sequels in a pretty significant way, which we'll discuss when I get to that movie. But it was after kind of Columbine that how we talked about the killers and how we talk about the trauma that's carried after significant events like these changed in the public landscape, which would later on inform some later movies, and kind of get to where we are today. But, yeah.
I think another thing on that stood out for me is the way that the media was like waiting for this to happen, and they were like preying on the downfall. They were like, and how media impacts essentially like what's being told, how is it being told. They're literally waiting for something bad to happen, and how that just like how that's portrayed, where media really is waiting on the downfall to be able to have something good to share.
That's actually one of the points I wanted to bring up here, was this film is also held up far better than any of its other brethren in the horror genre because of the use of media in the film and the angle of true crime, which now is just insanely popular. And so it has the true crime angle, but this film is every bit as much a commentary on slasher films and its tropes as it is about the media landscape at the time of its release. The shock jock journalism that you got, where like Top Story, which Gale Weathers works for, is so realistic to all the TV shows that were happening on primetime television at that time. And it's genuinely kind of realistic. Like, this is the time when this screenplay was written, the OJ trial and media coverage was happening. And finding the next story, the next way to become famous from an event like this, both from a journalistic standpoint, but also from a serial killer standpoint, is firmly embedded in this film. And it's also not lost on me that this film is loosely inspired by a true story of the Gainesville Ripper, which happened in Florida in 1990. He was a serial killer who killed like 5 students, and the town shut down and whatnot, and he would kill and pose the bodies as Billy and Stu do. If you remember, Steve is like posed in his chair. They pose Casey. They hang Principal Himmery from the football field. We don't see that, but we also see them hang Tatum. And Ghostface just kind of looks at her for a second and is like, huh, and then just goes back inside. All of this is kind of referencing that aspect of media coverage as well. This movie has one of my all-time favorite film lines, which not only is a great line, but it's also a firm stance on the reaction these movies can bring about. That line, it's a line that Billy has, which is, movies don't create psychos, movies make psychos more creative. What do people think about this line before I kind of put in my 2 cents on it?
I think it's pretty valid. I mean, like, I think if I I think it's relatable, because I think if I relate to it in like a mental health standpoint, with that being my job, it's kind of like one of those things where kids talk to me about self-harm and suicide and all that kind of stuff, where at this point I'm like, if I wanted to, I know a million ways I could do it. It just, would I be more creative than, because I know how it didn't work. So I think it's all those type of things where it's like, it just gives us more ideas on what to do. You're already born or you already have these tendencies in you. It just, do you want to make it flashier? Do you want to be a copycat? Do you want to outdo what they just did? It just gives you that, it's the media of it, essentially, of being like, I know what I can do. I know what I can do better. I know where I can be more creative, where I can go to that next level. I know what they did and it didn't work, where it's kind of all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's why it's really important, and kind of shows the importance of being careful on what we're putting on media and what people are consuming, because it does have an impact on how we think, how we reframe things cognitively, how we're processing and how we're internalizing things, where you might already have the thoughts, but it just gives you more ideas on how to go bigger, better, all of that.
Yeah, I think especially at the time, and again, in the wake of Columbine afterwards, the knee-jerk reaction to blame violent actions on violent films or video games or music is an incredibly reactionary take, considering people have been committing violence since the beginning of time. Movies don't influence that in a starting point sense. People are going to commit violent acts regardless of whether or not a movie like Scream exists. But it's also informed enough to know that movies do have an impact in some way. And it's not that a movie creates a psychopath. It's the psychopath is created and maybe will take a something they've seen in a movie and like act on it. But there are so many people out on this planet that watch so many movies and act out other things that or choose not to act out, that it's placing full blame on something seems misguided, I guess.
Yeah, I think one thing that was done well in the story is like it does talk about, like as you said, like it just makes the psychos more creative. It also shows like the whole end of this movie is written to be like, these guys were snowballing into failure, like they were never going to get away with this, because like the idea of them stabbing each other and saying they were the only ones left to survive and that it was the dad, like you're like, that wasn't going to work. Like these guys are clearly unhinged. They got creative and they got away with a lot, but like I felt like the ending of this was written to be like, they can do all this damage, but they were always going to lose in the end. And I like the way that they lost a lot, but I think even if they had gone through with the rest of their plan, like these guys were done. They lost. They were very short-sighted in what they wanted to accomplish. They got a little too greedy with what they were doing. I thought that was a really good sign, like, because that shows that, like, these people who glorified horror movies, like these two young dudes that glorified those movies and went on a killing spree. They weren't thinking, and they lost in a major way in dying, right? Like, and so there's no payoff for it. They're gonna be seen as pathetic and monsters when they thought they were going to be legends. And I like that was kind of the takeaway from the killers, was that they were always going to be seen as pathetic monsters rather than the legendary killers that they thought they were.
Did you catch the smoking gun that would have gotten them caught no matter what in the movie?
Probably not. I don't think
it was the camera. Gale puts the camera in, and so even if they'd killed Sidney, even if they'd done everything, they did everything in the kitchen, which you can see on the camera is in full view. So they would have been caught, even if they completed their task. I think the backstory of this film is also really neat. Every slasher film has to have really great backstory. You have an interesting one in Friday the 13th, certainly in Halloween. And this one kind of unfolds the story a little more similar to A Nightmare on Elm Street, where it lingers on little things before you're kind of told everything you need to know. Like, a lesser film would have given you up front or even shown you the death of, like, Maureen Prescott. But instead it starts with this Casey Becker death and Steve before it pans over to Sidney. And then we find out that she's reluctant to have sex or whatever, but then we kind of find out why, and as the scene progresses, it's about 25 minutes into the film before you even find out that her mother died prior to, and how everything is influenced once you know that she is dead is kind of neat. So I thought that this kind of kept into the old slasher tradition of having a pretty compelling backstory that takes a while to unfold. My next question for you is, okay, so Billy and Stu, are they gay? This is something that has been asked many a times. And I have my own suspicions there, and I'll explain where my stance is. But I want to hear from you guys. Do you, before I tell you what Kevin Williamson basically said?
I've seen this theory a lot online. I think it's kind of like, it's fun to look at, especially with like all the subtext of queer horror. But I just think, I personally don't think they're gay. I don't know if I'm wrong or if like the creator has said something different. I just think that they are like a little weird. But I think that not implicating gay people are weird, but their bond is just so so like strange, and it's kind of a thing that you don't see men be so close in like the way that they were, especially at the time that this was made, that people just like jump on gay. But I think their relationship is really interesting, whatever it is.
I largely agree with you. Did Paris or Jared have anything they wanted to add before I put in my 2 cents and then what the creative said?
Yeah, I guess I don't really have a whole lot of an answer, to be honest. It's one of those things where it's like, dog, that didn't even cross my mind. It's one of those like maybe, but does that really, say anything about the story as to whether or not like they could have been, queer, and that's but there's nothing in the story that really kind of comes up in. So it's one of those like I can't really give an answer because there isn't really any information other than like they're just two guys that are really close and kind of feed off of each other's energies. But that's, you could say that about so many people. If they are like they weren't written intentionally to be, and I don't think that there's anything really said about that being in the case either. It's one of those like they could be, and that's fine too, and but they also could not be, and it's the story is the same whether they are or they aren't. And I think it's interesting that people will kind of fixate on that. And it's like my thought is always like, what are you trying to say as to whether they are or they aren't? Because I definitely know that different people are going to have different thoughts about like whether they are or they aren't. I know some people are like, oh, it's just kind of like a fun thing to talk about. But I know some people are like, oh, I want to, if they are, then that's clearly because they're the bad guys, and it's like, well, that's not at all what they were trying to say. Like, that's not at all what those kind of conversations are about, And so it's like, are we having fun with the conversation, or are we just like trying to say something,
That's kind of where I'll dive in. So I watched this when I was like 10, 11 years old, and that never occurred to me once while watching it. However, I first heard the theory that they were gay when I was in college, and I was like, huh. So I went back and I rewatched the film from like a firmly kind of gay stance, and like there's certain things here and there that I think lend credence to it a little bit. But when you actually like dive into the actions of the killers, I don't think that they are. Like Billy tries to get laid after he kills each person, and successfully does so one of the times. So I think certainly Billy's not, and Stu, I think he just has an adoration for his friend that's like not specifically gay. Plus, if your gay representation in the movie is just these two individuals, that's kind of a bad look, right? Like the trope of the predatory gay was very prevalent in the 90s, so that is an aspect to take into consideration. But I don't think that at least Wes Craven put it out there with that in mind. Now, getting into what the actors have to say, and Kevin Williamson, the writer himself, is that both Billy and Stu actors say that they were gay. Apparently, Matthew Lillard had conversations while they were filming it, saying, like, so he's gay, right? And so he leaned into it, and you definitely see it with his performance. Billy Skeet Ulrich has said later that, yeah, they were gay. Kevin Williamson came out around 1999. He's the writer of this film, and he said that the subtext that's there is there because he modeled the two killers of this film after two real-life killers from the 1930s who were in a homosexual relationship and wanted to be a thrill killer. They only successfully killed one person and were caught and condemned, not necessarily for the crime that they committed, but for being two gay people in like the 1930s. So from the writing standpoint, apparently that's there. But when you apply logic into what their plan was and the characters themselves, I think it kind of falls apart. So does anybody have anything to say with all of that? Come to light?
I mean, I guess like my original thought was very much on par with what Jared said earlier. But if we are looking at a dual, like a dyad who is killing partners, if we're looking at the psyche of them, you usually have one who is more pushy and then the person who is more of a follower and is looking to appease the primary. And I feel like that is more of what I was getting from their relationship is Billy is the main, Stu is more of the appeaser within it. And I kind of thought that made more sense, where being gay or queer did not come to my mind at all, where I feel like they kind of follow more of that mainstream killing couple, as in like a dyad, more than like a legitimate couple, and fit that trajectory more than an actual couple.
I agree.
Yeah. While I was watching the movie, and it's like after the reveal and then talking about what they were doing and talking about how they were going to get away with it, I wrote down like, what is this movie trying to say about like straight privileged white dudes who have nothing left to do? Like, this was clearly just two psychopaths that were bored. Yeah, there was
They're the original
trauma and
incels,
motivations
right?
and stuff. Yeah, they were very incel-y, and like it was like, you know, it's and to use like the way of being like, oh, are they gay? And I'm like, well, doesn't this whole start because they rape a woman and they're constantly trying to get with these women as well? You know, whether there was like other stuff, you know, that we don't see, it's like at that point, it's like, well, I guess we don't see it, so like, how can we really comment on it in a way that's effective, right? Like, it's what we know about these guys is the terrible things that they have done to women. So what does that matter of like what we can talk about to what they do with men sexually, you know? Yeah.
All right. So to get further into my thesis of like they're not gay, I'm gonna track what the killers did, because if you really pay attention, you can figure out who did what throughout the entire film. And so we're gonna just go through. I wrote it all down, and so first off, this portion of it, like they decide to kill Maureen Prescott because of Billy wanted to do it. But this whole thing is that they team up to kill each other's girlfriends, and they start with Stu's ex. And the thing is each one kills the opposite's girlfriend. That's who's attacking who. So this movie starts with Billy calling Casey, who's flirting with her and gets her to flirt back with him, even to the point of denying that she has a boyfriend, which is the main reason why she and Steve were targeted in the first place, because she left Stu for Steve. Billy is stationed at the front door and Stu's in the back. Billy taunts her on the phone, and you can tell because she goes to the door and tries to get out and calls who's there, and he calls her out on it, which he'd only be able to hear if he was at the front door. Stu's in the back setting up Steve, and when she gets the question wrong, if you actually look at the layout of the house too, which Zach Cherry did this on his website, or his YouTube channel, the layout of the house is such that that porch is long and connected. You see it a little bit in the movie, but they were signaling each other from the side of the house, and then going back to the doors. But so Stu is the one that kills Steve. And then Billy continues to taunt as Stu chases Casey throughout the inside of the house. She leaves to the outside of the house where Billy kills her, and she pulls off his mask and has that slight moment of recognition. They then each go to their girlfriend's house afterwards as an alibi. Billy is instantly sexually charged and tries to get it on with Sidney after the killing. So I think that's where it kind of demonstrates that at least he is not, or he's interested in all things. So then, let's see. We next see them at the lunch where Stu's bragging about everything. Billy reminds him to kind of shut his mouth. Billy is the one that calls Sidney later in the house and taunts her until Stu jumps out of the closet, allowing that brief period where she has her back turned to the door for him to get in, either through upstairs in the house or like through that front door. Stu's the one that chases her around, and you can tell it's Stu because as he's running up the stairs, you hear him say, "Easy, easy," which is the same thing he says when Tatum's hitting him in the head with the sucker in the very next scene you see him in. I'm assuming they just lifted that sound clip and put it over. Stu flees after Sidney uses the computer to reach out to the 911 for the hearing impaired. Billy shows up to divert attention away from Stu. This is where, like, either he planned to get caught or he to throw suspicion off of him, or accidentally got caught and was smart enough to ditch like the father's phone. Billy's arrested and hauled off to jail. Sid receives a phone call from Stu, and from this point on, when we hear the voice changer, it's because Stu has it moving forward. He calls Tatum's house his girlfriend, so he obviously knows her number in an attempt to further exonerate Billy. Stu is super excited when they get to school the next day and kids are wearing the Father Death mask. The Father Death very specifically put there to like make you think that her father is the killer, or at least that's what their hope is, because that's who they're planning to take the fall for this. The Ghostface in the bathroom and the ones outside at Tatum's house and the grocery store, I don't think are either of them. If it had to be, it would have to be Billy, because Stu is accounted for in all those other times. But I think those are just people fucking around with the costume. Specifically, the one in the bathroom doesn't have a knife, and it's the only time you see Ghostface without a knife. So I don't think that's real. Let's see. Billy's the one that kills Principal Hembry and is the one that displays the body at the football field while Stu invites the girls to his party and then starts hosting the party. Billy's the one, when arriving to the house, that kills Tatum, which he signals to Stu with his eyebrows right when he arrives at the front door. And then, let's see here. Billy immediately goes upstairs and successfully has sex with Sidney at this point. Stu leaves the group while they're watching Halloween after the rules scene, and we don't see him again until the end. And this is the point where he calls the police station to give the anonymous tip about Neil Prescott's car, which gets Dewey and Gale to go investigate. He then is the one to use the voice changer, presumably, to call Randy in the living room that gets everybody to leave the house to go look at Principal Hembry's body. Stu then goes upstairs and kills Billy, and then chases Sidney around the house. Sid gets away, and so then Stu sets his sight on Randy, who gets distracted and runs outside to kill Kenny. Dewey and Gale return to the house after finding Neil Prescott's car. Gale accidentally runs off the road, which Stu finds her car. Meanwhile, Dewey enters the house where he gets stabbed in the back by Billy, who then goes outside to pursue Sidney in the car. Then they go back inside and you see everything as it plays out from that point onward. But if you're kind of paying attention, like sometimes the timing is kind of truncated, but like you can kind of figure it out. It's pretty wild how much thought was actually put into this.
I thought it was well done, because like I was sure that there was like a rhyme and reason for the where people were and all that stuff, outside of like, as we were talking about like the bathroom and like the convenience store. I was like, I don't know, and like I wasn't gonna figure it out. Those ones I still think were like kind of the oddball ones.
Yeah, I agree.
But like, you know, you can tell that there a lot of it was intentional, like the timing of things, like just how quick everything happens, and whatnot. And I thought that was like pacing was really well utilized throughout the whole thing.
That's fair. Other neat thing is right after like Stu kills Billy and Sidney goes running, she goes running into a different bedroom, which is presumably Stu's bedroom, which connects to the attic. And in the attic, you see some hanging dolls from the ceiling, one of which is hung exactly like Casey Becker was. And there's a brief shot of a dude in a chair that she runs past that's like sitting like in a hung chair. And so that suggests that like Stu mapped this out in his like attic beforehand, and non-observant parents, non-present parents never thought to question it, right? It's kind of neat set decoration stuff. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to touch on before I dive into fun facts and trivia about this film?
I think the only other thing I had that was specifically about like the making of the movie is I really liked the coloration and the texture that was used in a lot of it, from the costuming and just like the sets themselves. Like a lot of it looks like lived in, but still like a lot of scenes in this are really bright scenes, and there's a lot of really bright colors, and I feel like that just wasn't. Yeah, I still don't think that's a really normal thing that you see in like a horror movie, and I just I don't know, and it's probably just me being nostalgic of like early 2000s movies, because that's when I was watching movies a lot, as a kid, but. I just like, I was like the color palette and the texture of everything was just like really well done. I just feel like movies are just so smooth. Like the clothes and the walls and the sets are always so smooth now, and it's just like it doesn't feel like somebody's lived there or that somebody like is there often. Whereas like all these places, like most of the houses were large houses in this movie, which is pretty unbelievable from the normal viewer's standpoint. But they look lived in. They look like they're lived in by like regular people too. And I'm like, but it's obviously they needed big houses because it's a movie, So it's
all of it reaches. Yeah, all of it reaches for reality. Like people accuse this movie of being brightly lit, and yes, it is, but it's also a horror film taking place in the real world, and people have their lights on, right? If they're inside. And so I don't think it's any less scary. It's not as moody, maybe, but I think this proved that you can do scary by daylight almost. Right on. Anybody else have anything else they wanted to add before I dive in? All right. Fun facts and trivia. The original script of this film was titled Scary Movie and only changed to being Scream halfway through production to partially capitalize on the success of Janet and Michael Jackson's song by the same name. That was forced on them by the Weinsteins, who were the producers of this film. We'll probably touch on some other stuff with them later. The original script for this film was much darker, the Scary Movie script, and it had a less concrete motive for the killers. In that script, Gale was named Storm. Principal Hembry was not killed. That was a request done by the Weinsteins, who were like, you go 50 pages in this film without anybody dying. Somebody else has to die. And Williamson chose Principal Hembry. At the end of that script, Randy stays dead from the gunshot wound, but Dewey survives. In the published script, which you can buy, Dewey dies at the end of the script and he doesn't come back. But the biggest change was that Maureen Prescott was actually molesting both Billy and Stu, and she was grooming them the whole time, and that was their motive. They killed her because of what she was doing to them and other people around the town, which everybody kind of kept quiet on, and they grew a taste for murder and put their plan to make a real-life horror movie. That script also ended with a 5-page treatment for a second film, in case the first one were to sell. And that plot of that second film does stay intact for what the second movie is. This movie was originally released in December 20th of 1996 and was pronounced dead on arrival at the box office. It only made $6 million. However, in weekend 2, it didn't drop. And by weekend 3, it was actually growing at the box office and went on to gross over $100 million, remaining the highest grossing slasher film of all time until it was unseated by Halloween 2018. So it had a 22-year run. Wes Craven turned the movie down several times in an effort to get away from the horror genre. He was disinterested in continuing with horror, but other options for director, they approached Sam Raimi, and it was almost handed to Robert Rodriguez to direct. But at the last second, Wes Craven told the producers to make him an offer he couldn't refuse. They did, and thinking that just putting Wes Craven's name at the top of this, it would shape for a much better movie. And right they were. Lastly is David Arquette was originally approached to play Billy, but he decided he wanted to audition for the role of Dewey instead, which everybody told him was kind of crazy because that was a nothing character in the script. However, they loved him so much that they actually included a scene of him surviving at the last second, just in case audiences responded to him as much as the cast and crew did. And a lot of the characters on page are pretty meh. Billy and Sidney are super fleshed out, as is Gale to some extent. But what Wes and the cast brought to them is make them feel like real life people. And Dewey is one of those prime examples. Also, in the script, all versions of it, Gale comes off as she just made it up. She didn't think that Cotton Weary actually was innocent. She was just trying to become famous and sell a book. In this, you get the sense that she genuinely is good at her job. She's like Lois Lane, and she is pursuing truth, just in a kind of mean way. Does anybody have anything they wanted to say about any of those fun facts?
Yeah, I thought a lot about the characterizations while I was watching it. Like you said, like a lot of these people, they feel like they're real people, that they actually know each other. Even when you take into account the best friend character, she's very campy, but like you that doesn't take away from the fact that you're like, oh, this is a real person. Like all of them feel like somebody you've met or know. And they feel like they know. Yeah. And like they feel like they know each other, which I think is a big part of it too. Like you can tell that these people have known each other for a while, and that they have connections, and that like they might even have like inside jokes and secrets and stuff and whatnot, and like that like they're people that they don't just see each other for the 12 hours on set. Like the characters know each other, and I thought that really was neat. The I don't feel like a lot of the characters were even if their character was shallow and didn't have like a lot of depth to them, it didn't mean that their character was nothing. They still filled in a role. Like I really dug that about a lot of the characters, about how they were written like real people who have relationships with other people, because relationships is like the big motivation throughout the movie.
Indeed. All right. Well, for the last little bit here is review. What is our star rating going to be? How many scary movies do you give Scream? I give Scream 5 out of 5 scary movies. I think this is kind of like the perfect slasher film. It takes everything that's great about slashers and makes them to their best possible use. I think you have the best final girl in Sidney Prescott. I think you have that character of Randy being there as like the voice of the audience, quite literally, honestly, is just fantastic. Gale Weathers is a tremendous character and the best version of Lois Lane we've ever had. And then you have fun characters like Dewey and Billy and Stu, and Tatum is great. Like, it's great all around. It's scary. It's vicious in that opening scene. The performance by Drew Barrymore, like how she didn't get a nomination that year at the Oscars is fucked up. But yeah, so I give it 5 out of 5 scary movies. Lillian, what do you think?
I also give it 5 out of 5 scary movies. I think this movie is so well constructed, and like you said, it just takes all the best bits from slasher films and puts them into one. I think every character is so interesting, and just the twist with the double killers is so good and well thought out. I mean, like, even with everything that you laid out for us, like some of that I haven't caught on some of my rewatches, and it's such a well put together film, and I could watch it 1,000 times and never ever get bored of it.
Same. Paris, how about you?
I also would give it 5 out of 5 scary movies. I did not find it disappointing in the slightest. I think it was good that it was one of those things where you don't have to put all your energy and effort into keeping up and trying to really lock in to figure out like what is happening, where you can actually just really keep up and enjoy it as you're going if you want to do it that way. Or alternatively, you can really lock in and follow the story and kind of figure out the mystery for yourself, where you can kind of do either one. And I enjoy that because sometimes I'm really locked in and other times I just want to be there for the fun and enjoy. And I like that this movie you're able to do with. And I liked all the characters. I thought it was funny. I thought there was a lot of like good dry humor to it, comedy, while also having the classic slasher pieces to it.
Yeah, it really is funny, and you bring up a good point too, that if you want to just disengage and watch a scary movie, it's fully functional that way. But if you want to watch it as like try to actually figure out the mystery, you can do that and get a little more in depth. Jared, how many scary movies do you give this?
I don't mean to be too redundant, but I think I gotta agree with everybody that it's like a 5 out of 5 scary movies. From like also like the technical standpoint of like what Lillian said, it's really well constructed. All the technical elements of it are really pleasing, and it can be watched both just for fun and seriously. like it just kind of checks off every box, which is really nice. And like I'm not even saying that because like I know you guys like the movie, and like and I'm not a big horror movie guy, but I was just like, oh, this actually is like a really good movie. And that's saying a lot because so I watched this movie on I think it's Pluto, which has ass advertisement placements, and like
I'm sorry, man, that's rough.
And I still loved it. Like an ad started immediately when Sidney got attacked in the bathroom scene, and I was like, this movie's still good. Like it didn't take away those great parts of the movie, even though the ad started at crucial points, because I think it's on like an interval system.
Yeah.
And so I was like,
I've watched movies on Pluto.
It's tough, but the movie was still really good despite that. And I think that says a lot about it.
I'm gonna make sure that like when you are on the Scream 2 podcast that you have my Blu-ray.
I realized that really late last night. I was like, oh, I thought I had Paramount, and I didn't. And I was like, I'm either gonna steal these from Matt or I'm gonna like get Paramount for a little bit, and watch these movies for real, because well, like as I said, the movie, it didn't take away from the movie having to have all those ads in there, but like I do think it would be fun to watch without that. It would surely make the watch shorter, which would be good when I'm starting watching these at like 12 at night. So, you know.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming on and guesting here. Next time you see the Why We Horror podcast, I will be covering Friday the 13th, and we will do that March, Friday the 13th. So you can be on the lookout for that. But thanks everybody for coming and guesting on my favorite scary movie. Have a good one, and I'm going to stop recording now.